Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we're test driving a pretty exciting new vehicle in the marketplace. This is the 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5 electric crossover, and this is a fully loaded limited all-wheel drive, so this has the most power and the most features. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Before we get out in the test drive, let's talk about what we have here in our test vehicle. This is a fully loaded Ioniq 5 Limited with all-wheel drive, which means it has the most power and it has the most features inside and out. As tested, we are coming in right here at about $56,000, pretty much the most you can spend on this vehicle. That puts it right in the same ballpark as most of the vehicles in this class that you can compare it to feature for feature. The styling, though, is really what the conversation's about here. This is the latest iteration of Hyundai's parametric dynamics design language. We've seen that in the Hyundai Elantra, the Sonata, some of the other models that really pop. Well, this really pops, doesn't it? Just look at that face, a very robotic, angular, simple design, yet a lot of detail put into the creasing and just the little things like the finishes. Gloss black all the way across that face like a mask. Those headlights light up with a very pixelated looking daytime running signature light, LED headlights. They do work quite well at night. The finishes on here with the secondary trim, a satin silver plastic, and a little bit of a nose line right there on the front with the grille. And then as you look down on the lower fascia as well as on the rockers, you get these pinstripe sort of grooves that really amp up the detail. When you come around the corner, you can see that the wheel arch openings actually have these little cut lines in them that give it sort of a jet engine rotating type of look, and these are 20-inch wheels on the Limited. The hood is sort of a clamshell design. It cuts down across the fender well and opens up here. It's just a nice big shell, kind of a nice little futuristic touch. Looking at the door handles, you can see that they're sticking out here on all of our photos. Those are actually flush door handles. When you get away from the car with your key, they will eventually go back into the flush position, and when you lock it, of course, they go in, and when you approach the car, they pop out and they're ready for you to open the door. Pretty cool. Because this is a dedicated electric car architecture from the clean sheet of paper approach, the battery is located underneath the flat floor of the vehicle, and this is packaged in such a way that you can't actually see it really sticking down underneath the car, like for instance the Hyundai Kona EV. From this angle, one of the things I want to point out is continuing the discussion of the parametric dynamics design language. The lines in the doors really are captured well from this angle, the way the shadows hit them, the way that diagonal line goes from the top of the front door and cuts down into the lower rear rocker, and that finned trim. It's just very dressy on a shape that's actually quite simple in its form. And from this angle, I'm going to age myself a little bit. I think this captures a lot of the overall spirit and aura from the original two-box designs we saw in cars in the 70s, such as the Volkswagen Golf, the Rabbit, the first generation, and also a little bit low down the scale, the Dodge Omni, but it just has that sort of simple two-box look. The charging port is actually located on the rear quarter right here. You can press the button and it opens. It's completely power operated, and there's a button right here to close it. Personally, I'm not a real big fan of locating it on the back of the car. It forces you to back into spaces where there's public charging stations. It forces you to back into your garage if that happens to be where your charger's at. I'm just not a backer-inner. I'm one of those people that likes to nose into a parking space and nose into a charging station in my garage, etc. That said, this is a power lift gate, and looking at the taillights, more of that parametric dynamics design language. These are actually called parametric pixel taillights. It lights up with that nice pattern, very cool looking. More of the finishes that we talked about up front, the satin silver, a lot of the finned plastic down in the lower fascia. It's just very jazzy, very dressy. It's like it's wearing a pinstripe suit. The cabin of the Ioniq 5 is probably one of the most futuristic and forward-looking places that I've sat in recent memory, and a lot of that has to do with the materials and the colors that are going on here, and particularly the dash with its white instrument panel backdrop. That's something new and fresh. quite honestly. And what this is two different 12.3-inch screens, one for the instrument cluster, the other for the infotainment system. And this is something we see in other Hyundai vehicles, but here it's all white. It has a very iPhone-esque sort of look. Good quality materials here, very fitting of its price tag, and they've used eco-friendly materials here, which is to say a lot of recycled materials and sustainably sourced materials. One of the reasons why these seats, while they look like leather, they aren't. These are actually a vinyl. When it comes to comfort, these seats are quite comfortable. They're power adjustable both for the driver and for the passenger. And the driver's seat actually has this very interesting little pad that comes out, an extra support underneath the front of the seat that you can use that's power adjustable. Among the features in the limited trim grade here are this large panoramic roof. Now it doesn't open, but it does provide a lot of nice light, and it does have UV protection. The center stack, as we always talk about, it doesn't necessarily have one. Instead, there is the climate control here, and because this has a flat floor, you can see they've really utilized the design of that to give us a sense of space. Down here at the very bottom, there's a large cubby, power ports, and the console. Now this console is actually a sliding console. You can adjust its position to be wherever you want it. And while I think it's kind of a neat thing, I don't really see what practicality that gives me other than, wow, it's adjustable, isn't that cool? But looking at it, it is a practical design. Cup holders are right here, and there are USB ports and a charger down there for your phone, a wireless charger. Inside here, storage. It's just large enough for my phone and glasses and a few things like that. But down here in the console in the lower section, a very large bin that you can put backpacks, purses, and large items such as that. The steering wheel design is actually pretty interesting and futuristic. I think it almost looks like it's upside down, but it has a drive mode selector you can hit with your thumb that, when you look forward, adjusts the information on the cluster. It gives you a different look for each one of the drive modes, and the graphics on this instrument cluster are actually pretty slick. They've really put a lot of thought into making it modern and making it contemporary in its look. The actual gear selector here is something a little bit different than I've seen in a lot of other cars. It's actually a stalk that comes out. It doesn't move, but it has a twist that allows you to twist it into whichever gear, and then you press the button for park. Just something a little bit different. While I usually like a lever, don't care for knobs. In electric cars, this is typically what you find. Here, it's a pretty nice solution. The rear seat space of the Ioniq 5 is a place that I find very comfortable, very spacious, and with this big, huge glass roof, very airy, as you can see. Now, these seats are set for my height, about 5'8", with my shoes on, and as you can see, I have a lot of legroom, plenty to spare. I could have a 6'4" guy up here, and I'd probably still be fine. Now, these seats, the seating height is a little bit on the lower side compared to a lot of SUVs out there, but it's not uncomfortable. A lot of range of adjustment here. These slide fore and aft, and there's also a nice recline adjustment. So if you're sitting back here, you've got some ways to get yourself in the right spot. Amenities back here. There are 2 USB ports and a little bit of a cubby down at the end of the console. There are vents back here, but they're actually on the door posts. Something that you usually don't find unless you're up in more luxurious cars or SUVs. There is a fold down armrest in the center with cup holders in it. Now these seats, they do fold down in a 60-40 split to give you a nice flat load floor. The cargo space here is actually pretty impressive as it is, and underneath that floor, sadly you won't find a spare tire, but there you will find a tire inflator kit and the home charger cable if you're going to be plugging that into your household outlet. When it comes to rating this interior, I find that the fit and finish is on par with vehicles that cost twice this much. The material quality very good, and I absolutely love the modern contemporary design here. I do like the fact that Hyundai has given us switch gear that's of a very high quality, and a few interesting things. The versatility here, a little bit different, but very versatile, a lot of storage, and I like the way that they've really given us the benefit of all of this room afforded by the flat floor. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is one you're going to find very familiar if you've been in other Hyundai vehicles. It's the large premium 12.3-inch touchscreen display, has Bose premium audio, and it has excellent graphics. And over time, getting used to these, I have found that using it is quite easy. The menus are very well laid out, the controls are good. Here I have a hard control for the volume knob and a hard control for tuning. Makes it easier to flip through the channels really quickly if you need to. There is a lot of feature content here: Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It's not wireless, however. You can also choose screens for the EV use, so you can see what your battery is doing and see what you need to do in the way of charging. The nav system, of course, can help you automatically find chargers. Voice activation works very good. This has an excellent 360-degree camera system that can switch views automatically on its own to sort of help you find your way if you're getting up next to curbs and things like that. At the end of the day, I find that this is one of the best systems in the contemporary class that we find ourselves right now. This infotainment system gets 5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's take a drive. So the first question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're out here in the middle of nowhere, and hit it. Woo! Ha, whoa! And 60. My goodness. Woo! This got some snap, man. So 320 horsepower from its 2 motors, front and rear, 446 pound-feet of torque. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you combine 446 pound-feet of torque with all-wheel drive with no wheel spin, as you can see, that gives you it gives you what was that? Like a pretty good kick in the back. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. What can I say? Boom. Yeah. So lots of power going on here. Now, this new chassis, the eGMP platform, is a dedicated chassis. This is not some other Hyundai that's also electric like the Kona EV. And so the powertrain is completely dedicated with a flat battery pack located underneath the floor, 74 kilowatt hour battery. And so this has a lot of power, the capacity for it. When you get the more base models, it comes with just rear wheel drive, and you have 2 different power levels you can choose based on the trim grade. Now, when it comes to driving this around town, obviously you have instantaneous power. There are 3 drive modes. You've got Sport, which we were on, Eco, which makes it suddenly feel like it weighs 10,000 pounds. And then you have Normal, which is a nice blend between the two. The other nice driving aid this has are these paddle shifters on the steering wheel, which enable you to control the regenerative braking and set it to your liking. And depending on the drive mode, that can be automatic, but sometimes you like to be able to just do it the way you want it. So when you lift off the pedal, when it's on its strongest setting, it's just like you're putting on the brakes, and that really helps extend your battery range. So around town, that's where you're going to get the most battery range. And in that way, this is rated at 110 mpge city, 87 highway, and 98 combined, which mpge is an equivalent to miles per gallon. It's very competitive with a lot of the other cars that you can look at in this price range. I'm very happy with this powertrain. It impresses me not only with its power and its drivability, but in its adjustability to really tailor it to the way you want to drive. This powertrain gets 5 out of 5 stars. When it comes to the ride, drive, and handling of the Ioniq 5, it has a very characteristic ride of most of the electric cars that I've tested recently, and that is to say that it feels heavy. And that's because it is 4,662 pounds. That puts it on par with a lot of larger full-size SUVs. But they have tuned the suspension to be pretty firm so that you can drive it out on a curvy road and around town, and it doesn't necessarily feel like you're driving a big, large, heavy SUV. I will say, however, that one of the things that comes with that firm ride with a heavy electric vehicle like this is the ride can be a little bit bobby and bouncy. It tends to bob forward and back, and I get a lot of pitching, and it tends to be a little bit bouncy, like maybe a lowered car. Maybe you've ridden in one of those that's been lowered and it's on the rubber bumpers. It's not as bad as some of the electric cars that I've driven, but it is pronounced enough that I actually had to turn off the HUD, the head-up display, because those numbers that were projected on the windshield bouncing up and down around town is actually starting to make me a little bit carsick, because of that. It just accentuated it and really made it a visible thing that I could see, let alone feel. So turning that off really helped the driving experience quite a bit. On my 70-mile-an-hour sound test, this rated 63.8 decibels, which is about average with most cars out there, and I think that's pretty good considering that I don't have a lot of cloth in this interior to absorb sound, and these are pretty big tires. When it comes to rating this chassis, it's all good except for the tuning of the dampers and the springs could use a little bit more work so that it doesn't quite have that bobby bouncy feel in certain situations. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. When I talk about value, it's usually calculated and thought about in the prism of looking at all the cars out there that this competes with. And in this size class of electric crossover right now, there's getting to be a lot of competition. The Tesla Model Y, the Mustang Mach-E, and quite a few others, some from luxury brands out there. And so this is a car that starts out at about $40,000. As tested, we're right around $56,000. And if you qualify, of course, you take that $7,500 tax rebate off the price of this car, and that sort of helps you justify that little bit of extra money for a car of this size. But that said, I look at what this offers. There's a lot of electric cars out there that are coming from new companies that never built cars before, and that's not a bad thing. But when you get a car that comes from a company that already knows how to build radios and seats and make things work, and then they also make it electric, and they do a good job at it, why, that's a pretty attractive formula to look at, I think. And here, warranty coverage among all of the things that we look at to come up with a value assessment is very good. 10 years, 100,000 miles on powertrain, 10 years, 100,000 miles on any electrical drive components. And then of course, 5 years, 60,000 miles bumper to bumper. So this really does have one of the longest and best warranties you can get. At this price with all the feature content here, I think we're at a pretty good place. I put value at 5 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, this car gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. Very impressive. I'm very impressed with this car. It's built well. I love the design. It just really is the most futuristic thing I think you can buy right now in terms of styling and design. If you want that, maybe you don't, but that's what this is. That's the box it occupies. And so there you go. Definitely worth a test drive if you can get the opportunity to do it if you're looking for an electric. Also, the Kia EV6, which is built on the same platform, shares a lot of the same power and battery and all of that, going to drive very similarly, just a different design. So there you go. Please follow us on social media. You can see all of our links down there, Test Driven TV. Also, see our latest video right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.